fades out really quick. But anyways, hey guys, it's Nate, and it's time for another bite size. So Josh was supposed to join me tonight, but he's a lame flake, and he had better, cooler stuff to do, like visit with his family in Texas or something. I guess. But it's okay. Tonight's going to be a pretty easy one. We're going to talk through the Backlog Beatdown 2025 rule set. Um, Not too much different if you've been, playing along over the last couple of years. The meta is pretty at a pretty good place. We've got a few, like, basically one issue of like streamlining, a little bit of a clarification on some things, and we're actually going to be introducing a new mode. Is, I guess, the term that I would use to describe it. But I'll get there all in good time, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of just clip through this pretty quickly, and all the stuff won't be stupid, because this is the third time I've had to do this because you hardware failure, which is awesome. But just sort of kicking it off. If if you've been participating in the meta, you have a general drift, and if you don't, or if this is sort of your first time hearing about it, or you're just jumping on, this is a pretty good place to jump on to. I'm going to go try to do a pretty quick but thorough overview of the rules. It's not too complicated, but yeah. But there's a little bit of a preamble that I just want to read through real quick here, that our buddy John wrote up, and it goes like this: As Christians, we want to be good stewards of what we own, especially with respect to our recreation. In the zeitgeist of constant entertainment and entitlement, it is easy to get discontented with what you own and chase after the high of the novelty. To help mitigate the temptation of FOMO, or the fear of missing out, particularly with respect to video games, we developed what we call the Backlog Beatdown. The goal of the beatdown is to finish and enjoy and prioritize what you already have, to limit or restrict mere accumulation. Okay, so just kind of moving along here. It's a game, and so there's scoring. Um, and the way that it works is you want to chase a low score. You want to push down into the negatives. Like, think of it as if you've got your list of backlog games, that you're subtracting games from that. Okay, um, when you buy games, it actually adds to that. So there's a positive thing, and we'll just go through this real quick here. There's basically, I think, five or six scoring states. I think six, seven. Yeah, but we'll talk about that. So there's purchase or acquisition. Purchasing a game in the current year, so 2025, the season starts January 1st, it ends December 31st. If you purchase a game, you're going to take in 2025, you're going to take a +1. If you start a game that you purchased in 2025, you're going to take another +1, okay? Because we're trying to encourage you to play what you already own. Now, if you start a backlog game, a game that you owned prior to 2025, there's no penalty, so zero points. You beat a game, you get a -1, and beating a game, we all know what beating a game is. It's rolling credits. It's getting the end state, whatever. It's like you win. It's rescuing the princess. It's defeating the big bad evil guy. You can also, so we all know what beating a game is. You can also abandon a game, and for the purposes, because let's be honest, like, sometimes you're playing something and it's just not fun. It's just not catching you. And so we wanted to give people a scoreable way to utilize that. There are a couple of stipulations or considerations to just grip up on here for a second. So if you're going to abandon a game, what we would really encourage you to do is make sure that you've given it a solid 60. Okay, and the solid 60, all that means is, like, you've given it enough time to really sit with it and figure out whether, like, to feel the game as it is, to let it present itself to you, right? So for a shorter game, that might be an hour, might be an hour and a half. For a longer game, that might be 3 or 4 hours. There's no real hard and fast on this. It's more of a, like, but just make sure. And again, this is sort of like, it's all honor code. It's all sort of spirit of the game. It's all to, like, sort of help you think about these things a little bit more. So just give it a solid 60. The other thing is, one of the ways that we kind of like keep track of all of this is in our Discord server. We have a 2025 Backlog Beatdown channel. We talk about it. We sort of keep track of our scores there. We also use the GG app. to sort of cultivate lists and everything else. So there's a couple different tools um, that we use in order to track all of this, and it can be a little overwhelming if you let it get to you. But with abandonment, the way that you're going to do that is if you're participating in our Discord in the 2025, and you're like, I was just say, I'm playing Super Mario Wonder, and I I might start really playing that. But anyways, but just say, for example, you're playing that, you get 3 hours into it, and you're like, this is just not my thing. Like, I'm out. You can abandon that. But what you do is you say like, hey guys, I'm going to abandon Super Mario Wonder, and you're gonna instead of just saying it's I don't like it, think about some of the things you didn't like, and sort of give us a little bit more there. So say like, hey, I just really wasn't vibing with the controls. I might have liked the design and overall the game, but I just realized that maybe, hey, like platformers aren't my thing. I don't really, yeah, whatever. But something a little more substantial than just I didn't like it. And that's especially relevant this year with some of the new mode that we're going to be rolling out. There's also a completion scoring. So completion, for the sake of the beatdown, is any 100%. Platinums count towards this. 1,000, getting 1,000 achievement, gamer score on a game. Like getting all the achievements for the purposes of this game. That's excuse me, pardon me. That counts. I have a little bit of a head cold cough sort of thing going on, so I'll try to limit that. But so completing it, we all kind of know what completing a game is. It's and if a game isn't like some older arcade games don't have that, what we're gonna say is like if you went to like just say like Mega Man, you know, or maybe that's not the best one. Like I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Like Ducktales, the Ducktales game. Like if you can beat that on one save file without taking advantage of like save scums and um, like save scumming or doing like the rewind feature or whatever. Like if you could beat something like that on like basically one save file without cheating, and I hate using the word cheating, but taking advantage of like modern technological sort of quality of life, ease of access kind of stuff, you could count that as a completion as well. And that's honor code stuff. So it's like, yeah, there's also like websites that like if you Google, like I remember I was looking at Earthbound. I was like, what would people consider like a 100% Earthbound? And it was like, fill out all the bestiaries and all that other stuff. So yeah. Anyways, just to sort of give you a little bit of a sort of a practical application for how this might work. I'm just going to run through this right here, and we're going to sort of apply all the different categories here. So, for example, you purchase Triangle Strategy in 2025, you'll get a positive one. If you play Triangle Strategy in 2025, you'll get an additional positive one. If you roll credits for the game, you get a negative one. And if you continue playing the game, complete all major side quests. Oh, there is a long game bonus. And this is you go to how long do we. I skipped right past that because my brain went. So we'll double back here. If the game you're playing, if you suspect that it is 30 hours or longer, go to how long to beat, check the time to beat under just main game. If it is 30 hours or longer, you can claim a long game bonus. Okay. So, and again, I'm going to roll through this example here, and that'll sort of, that will even it out. But, so you purchase Triangle Strategy in 2024, you get a positive one. You play it in 2020 or 2025, you get a positive one. You roll credits, you get a negative one. You complete it, so you do all the side quests, you 100% it, you get another negative one, and because it's over 30 hours, you get another negative one. So the net is you get positive one, negative one, negative one, negative one. You get a net total of negative one to score that out. Now, if that's backlog game, it's all, it's all bonus or whatever. Just say in an alternate use case, say you buy Triangle Strategy and you start it, and after about 10 hours of gameplay, you decide that it's just not your thing. Again, you go into the Discord, you sort of talk to everybody about it, and you say, hey, like I really like it's just not, it's not vibing. Here's like, turn-based strategy things, like it's just like I didn't like the weightiness, whatever, but just a little more than just I didn't like it. um, but you could do that. So you would take one plus one for the purchase, plus one for the start, and then you'd actually lose -1. You'd lose one off that for abandoning it. So it would, your net total at that point in time would be +1 for that. Um, Now there are special cases, right? So let's, sometimes you're gifted a game, or like, pre-orders and kickstarts, like, or crowdfunded games. Like there's some wrinkles there that we need to talk about. So let's start with pre-orders and crowdfunding. um, Pre-orders and crowdfunding, you basically, it's pre-orders you treat as acquisitions, and crowdfunding. And the way that it works is, like, if you pre-ordered something last year, so in 2024, or you crowdfunded something in 2024 and it comes out in 2025, there is no penalty for playing that game. However, because it was paid for before the beginning of this season. However, if you pre-order or crowdfund something in 2025 and it comes out, that's just a purchase. It's just an acquisition, and standard scoring applies. Okay, so it's the year that the money was spent. Um, Everything else, it's just the same. And if you like pre-order or crowdfund fund something this year, that just counts as an acquisition. But you are free to play that game whenever it comes out. Like, let's say they come out in 2026, free to play with no worry about penalties. Gifted games and trade-ins, again, a little bit of a wrinkle here. Any game that you receive but you don't pay any of your actual money for, that is a gifted game. Okay, and there are some different scenarios. So obviously, like stuff that you get for your birthday or Christmas, or stuff like that. Games now, and with the following, I just want to make sure that we're crystal clear on this. Um, when it comes to the in-store credit and all the other stuff we're going to talk about, the in-store credit, the trade-in, the gift cards, whatever, that has to cover the entirety of your purchase for that. But you can acquire those, and the only penalty that you would take is one for acquisition. You don't count that as a purchase, and so you don't take a penalty, a +1 penalty for playing that game. So you can acquire, you register the acquisition, and then you can play the game, and standard scoring applies. Okay, fairly simple, right? Moving on here. So we've got some extra wrinkles here, and for the most part, all of this is going to be folded into basically flex plays. So last year we had some categories. We had, you could play a borrowed game, or a game that you share a digital library with somebody with, and yeah, my brain skipped this, but you get borrowed games and shared libraries. You can, like, my brother and I, we share PlayStation libraries with each other, so that when one of us buys stuff, but those count as borrowed games. And this year, you'll have 3 flex plays that you can redeem towards borrowed games, subscription games, or replays. And we'll cover all of those here in due time. But let's just sort of like, the way this works is that you beat the game. You can't apply any extra bonuses outside of, you can apply a completion bonus. Any um, initial completion of a game at this point in time is worth -1. And there's a little bit of a completion wrinkle to here too that we'll get into in just a little bit, but not trying to I'm not trying to dogpile you. But borrow games and share libraries, you can redeem flex plays to do that. You can use all 3 of them. You can use 2 of them. You can use 1 of them. Online and subscription services. So that's, I mean, and it's, again, you borrow a game from a friend, he gives you the disc, like, the whole, like, hey, this is how you lend a game to your friends, like the PlayStation Dunk or whatever, or just, again, shared digital libraries. Those all count as borrowed games. So we all know how that works. Just for the sake of scoring, though, because it's not really helping you beat down your backlog. It's not really adding to anything either. But for online and sub services, we do draw a bit of a distinction Online services are things like PS Plus Essential, Nintendo Switch Online, the base version, and Microsoft Game Pass base. And those are all necessary to use online components of those different game ecospheres, so to speak. And so the games that come with them, so the three games that come with PS Plus, the default NSO library, and whatever comes alongside with the Game Pass base, those there's no penalty for acquiring them, and there's no penalty for playing them. Right, so you can just jump right into them. That's really. However, subservices we treat differently. We treat those more as like borrowed games. We recognize that subservices are a really great deal. Things like PS Plus Extra and Game Pass Ultimate, they're the best values in gaming, But again, it sort of runs counter to the meta of this game, and so we don't really reward, but we also don't want to be too punitive. But what we want to say is like, listen, you can. That's a way, but that's a way to play games, and it's a perfectly valid way. But it's not for the intents and purposes of this game. It doesn't really have a place. But however, for sub games, you can redeem those three flex plays that you have. Those can be redeemed towards those and treated like you can score a -1. And again, you can score on completions. So you could beat a game and complete a game. And again, the initial completion, initial beat, whatever. So moving on here, just replays. We all have games that we love. I love Chrono Trigger. I play it every couple of years. I probably actually do. But for the intents and purposes of the beatdown, it doesn't really make much sense. And like it's more about beating the things that you haven't played, anyways. But we wanted to give people a path forward to saying like replays. And so again, those flex plays can be redeemed towards replays. And maybe you've beaten a favorite game over and over again, but maybe you've never 100%ed it. Like maybe you've never gotten all the endings or whatever. Um, you can score out again on the initial completion. Moving, so just those are the three use cases for flex plays: is sub games, borrowed games, and replays. Um, as far as like other scoring complications, perhaps you have bundle games and compilations. Like Capcom has all those fighting game compilations going on right now. Those are like, it's like you buy one package and you get like 7 games. The way that scoring works is like if you were to buy something like that in 2025, you would take 1 point for the acquisition, and then when or if you played those games in 2025, you would take an additional point for playing them, and then just again standard scoring applies, but it's per title. So you take 1 point for acquisition, period, and then there'd be another um, per title, there'd be a -1 for beating. So just something to think about. Like, there's actually like a way like you can sort of like pile on, especially if you're like beating and completing all of those games. Those compilations actually represent a bit of a you can score um, to a much more greater extent using like scoring out on a compilation. Um, and again, same with like the bundled games. Like you buy, like let's just say there's a bundle through Humble Games, and you buy this one thing, and you get 6 games, one acquisition point, and then when or if you play those games if you play those games in this year, then you would score the play. You would take the play penalty for each one of those. Remakes and remasters. At this point in time, it kind of like these things become a bit of a discussion, and it becomes basically like how substantial is the change. You look at the Final Fantasy remake, and it's very clearly a different game. But some remakes are just basically they're up-resed. They're sort of there's not really any significant change. I think about like the Alan Wake remaster, that's basically the same game with slightly better models. So it's like there'd be no penalty for Alan Wake if you already own that, right? And again, if you like, and this is basically coming to like if you were to buy these games again, like I owned Alan Wake back in the 360 days. We played it for the podcast. I purchased the Alan Wake remaster, and there was no penalty. I could do that with no penalty, and I could play and beat that. Um, because it's essentially kind of like the same game with like some minor quality of life improvements, but no substantial changes to the story or the game mechanics. That's really sort of like the defining issue there. It's like with remakes and remasters, and it's only this. It's like you're buying a remake of a game that you've owned forever. Like there's I think a game called Splintered or Shattered for PS3, and I bought the remaster for PS4. I owned it on PS3 years ago, bought it for PS4. There was no penalty for me reacquiring that because that remaster or the remake doesn't offer any substantial changes. It's just it's more about like purchasing remakes and remasters because a lot of times those actually serve to bring older games forward. Um, I think one of the things is like great example of this are the Resident Evil 4, Dead Space remake, stuff like that. The Silent Hill 2 remake. So if you own previous versions of those games, I think actually we pretty much ruled that all three of those are there's substantial enough changes that would just be new acquisitions. So those are bad examples. But if they were just more of like, yeah, so um, but yeah, that's something that like if you're buying a remake or a remaster so that you can play like an old favorite in sort of a more modern setting, talk to us in the Discord and we'll see if it should count as a new acquisition or if the changes aren't substantial enough, it's just you're reacquiring a game. And again, the so we've got the replay bonus. And again, just sort of to stress like any initial completion on a game in an ecosphere. So this is something that we wanted to sort of like hammer out a little bit because there were some questions. Initial completions in an ecosphere count. So for the example I'm going to give here is like I own Bastion in like 5 different places. In theory, I could play through and complete each one of those. Now I've already beaten the game, so I'm not going to be able to take any points for beating it. But I could, in theory, play and complete Bastion in each one of those, like on my PC, on my Nintendo Switch, on my Vita, on my PS4. You know, I might have it beaten on PS4. I don't know, but on PlayStation, I don't know. But because I also own it on 360, I like Bastion. It's a pretty good game. In theory, I could complete those, and for each different environment that sort of rests in, that would be a -1. There's no beating it. It's kind of counterproductive, but we did just want to give a nod to like and again, this is a way to score out additional or just score out subscription service games. Like if you really like a subservice game, you can complete it to get a -1. So that's really it for that. That's pretty much covers all of the scoring variables and all the whatever. But what we wanted to do, and again, just sort of reiterating, most the replays, the subservices, and the borrowed games, it's one category that all falls under flex play, and you can use those 3 flex plays a year, however you want. So you can one from each pillar, all 3 from replays, all 3. You get it. You're all smart. I believe it. Um, so what we're introducing this year, and this is something new, and depending on how this sort of rolls out, depending on how this shakes out, we might keep this going, but we also just want to sort of like, we also don't want to encourage like the beatdown is meant to be sort of a tool to help you think about your habits, your time and your consumption patterns and all of that. It's there to help you pump the brakes a little bit and just be a little bit more mindful when it comes to this hobby. So, but we did want to offer like a little bit of a gamification, and there have been people who have asked about like ways to score like bonus points. And so what we're doing is we're introducing the Backlog Beatdown 2025 Locked and Loaded Special. Okay, and that's what we're calling this right now, and it's mouthy and it's wordy because we are really good at being bad at brevity. Um, So the way this is going to work, and I'll read this description, but and then we'll sort of talk about this in how this is going to actually work. So, like, I'll just give you an example, right? These are games on your backlog that you're going to commit to focus on playing this year for an added bonus. You're going to submit a list of games, a minimum of 3, no maximum. Okay, that's important. Minimum of 3, no maximum, that you currently own, and you're going to do that in the Discord channel, in the 2025 Beatdown channel. So you're going to submit that list, and you're going to say, in 2025, I'm going to commit to beating these games. Okay, so you're going to submit that list, and you must start each game on your list from the beginning. So if this is a game that you've sort of been like, we don't want any of this, like you've got sort of like it almost up against the finish line, and you're gonna just like knock it off for like an easy, like no exploits, right? This is a game that if you have an old save file for it, you don't go back to that. You start from the beginning. You start with a fresh playthrough. um, must start each game on your list from the beginning. You may not pick up from a previous save file. If you finish all of your games before 2026, you will get an additional bonus equal to -1 multiplied by the amount of games on your list. Okay, that bonus is granted once all of the games on the list are finished, not as each game is finished. So this is an all or nothing thing. You either do it or you don't. Okay. Now, if you don't meet the goal of finishing all the game, if you don't meet the goal of finishing all the games on your list, you get no bonus for the year. Write a bigger list for more bonus points, but don't get in over your head, or you won't get anything at all. Finishing a game. Now, for this, we talked about those different end states, so abandonment, completion, etc. Finishing a game means reaching the end state or rolling crits, so beating the game. Abandonment also qualifies as finishing. However, what that does is it basically zeroes out that game. So let's say you take 10 games on your list, and and this is where we're really going to really encourage people to be. If you're going to use abandonment in this, we're going to really encourage you to be a little more robust in the explanation. Okay, but like and kind of like this, what happens though is, like, you have 10 games, you get 7 of them, and you're like, I played through them, I like them, this is fine, this is good. And you get to, let's just say, like, Josh abandoned Mike Tyson's Punch Out last year. So, like, you have Mike Tyson's Punch Out on your list, you get to it, and you get into the same spot where Josh was, where it's like it was just too much. He just realized, like, he had sort of aged out in the sense that, like, he couldn't keep up with the game anymore, and so he abandoned it. You can abandon those games, and it actually counts towards the progress of your bet. But what it does is it actually zeroes out that one. So it's um, you don't receive a bonus for the abandoned game, but it does allow you to finish your entire list of games and collect the bonus for the games on the list in which you have reached the end state. So, am I making, like, if you put 10, if you do a wager of 10, and you abandon 3 of those games, those are justified abandonments, you will get a 7 additional beatdown, or an additional -7 applied to your beatdown score at the end of the year. So, and again, there's no max, but there is a minimum of at least 3. And okay, and so just in closing thoughts here, as is the case with the entire Backlog Beatdown metagame, the Backlog Beatdown 2025 Locked and Loaded Special is meant to be a tool to incentivize you to focus on the games that you already own. These special bonuses will run through the 2025 season, and at the end of the year, we're going to reevaluate. Josh and I are going to and John, we're going to reevaluate this. We're going to see if it was useful, if it was good, or if it just was kind of like whatever. And so yeah, just be cool. And if it turns out to kind of be like not great, we might not do it again. So if anyways, so just, we want this to be help. We want this to kind of like gamify it, make it a little more fun. And so just be cool, like, beat down those backlogs, my guys. And that's really it. Like, those are all the rules. That's all the updates. I don't have anything else. It seems like everything actually worked this time. So hey guys, I'm so glad we had a couple minutes to chop it up here. And like, do the things. And until next time, well, yeah, just do the things. I'll catch you later.